couple months away
Yes,
from taking over. How are you feeling?
I'm excited. I'm apprehensive just in the sense that I recognize the huge job that's out there. I also recognize, and I don't think this is something I totally understood when I was running, the hope that so many citizens in the city now have based on what they feel that I'm going to be able to do. And so I'm very excited to have that. I'm very excited to have hope because I think our city really needs to have hope. So I recognize the job, and I'm excited, but I recognize the more time I have to prepare for, I think, January 3rd, the better will be.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just talking to somebody recently. I said, everyone I feel like we're talking to, we're saying, well, things will get better when Ivan Bates takes over.
Yeah.
When Ivan Bates gets in office, the city will be different. You're starting to feel, is that pressure, do you feel, or is that, is the city setting a high expectation for you?
Well, there are high expectations. I recognize that. But I have high expectations for myself. I think it's important to recognize it's not going to be a flip of the switch. It's going to take a while. But I think day one we can see a change in attitude. One of the things I talked about is this isn't a me, this is a we. So I think day one you'll see it's not about me, it's we. I'm really big on collaboration. I'm good on working with the stakeholders to make sure that we're able to do the best job for the citizens. I think for me, I've spoken to so many people. I spoke to the mayor, the police commissioner, I spoke with the governor. I always talked about collaboration. We can change policies day one, but they're relationships. Any type of relationship that's been broken in the past, it takes time to heal it, to grow. And so I wanted to get a start on having these new relationships to work on them as quickly as possible.
You talk about policies, and I know that during the campaign we talked a lot about what was different from you, from some of the other opponents, especially the incumbent. When it comes to that relationship, we've heard from a couple of council members in the police department that the communication wasn't there when the policies were rolled out, the big change about the non-prosecution policies. That communication seemed to have been lacking. Do you think that hurt the relationship with the police department, with the mayor, with the city in general, and how do you plan to start to rebuild that?
Without a doubt, any relationship, if you don't have proper communication, is going to fail. And I know that from my own personal experiences. If I don't communicate, then that relationship isn't going to be the best. And for me, I'll take a perfect example, the police commissioner. We had lunch about 2-3 weeks ago, and it was a terrific lunch. We were able to sit down and talk, and I explained, hey, I ran on if you have an illegal gun, you will go to jail. And I really want the police to go out there and to constitutionally enforce the law, to bring the illegal guns. Let us work to put the case together and let us hold people accountable and send them to jail. That's what we first must do. I also explained, I heard what he had to say, when you change the policy, it's like steering a big ship and trying to do it on a dime. You can't do that.
Right.
He need to have the opportunity to know the change of policy so he can properly train the officers. And I said, I hear you. January 3rd, when I take the office, if the law is on the books, the police have the opportunity to enforce it. Now, how do we do that? That's up to your discretion. I'm not the police. But trespass, loitering, low level, maybe you give a warning the first time, then a citation, and then the third time, you're probably going to have to go to jail.
Do the officers know that they'll have that ability to do that? Because that's a change from the current policy.
I told the police commissioner that's what I would like to go ahead and do, and that as far as I'm concerned, the state's attorney, if the law is on the books, that the officers can enforce it. I think that's part of the communication. But the police commissioner, they have to make the decision if they're going to do that or not.
Did he say he would?
I believe he will.
Okay.
In the sense that I don't want to speak for the police commissioner. He had a big smile on his face, and one of the things I get from the police commissioner was this. He's a police officer and spent his whole career as a police officer. Police officers have rules, and they don't want to live in the gray. It was black or white. If the law is on the books, I don't make the law. The police don't make the law. The police enforce the law, and we, the prosecutor, what I will do is make sure those individuals are held accountable. Some may need jail, some may need diversion, some may need community service, some may need just the arrest or just the citation. That'll be our discretion. However, people will be held accountable.
You talk about laws on the books. Let's talk about squeegee kids.
Oh, yes.
Because laws on the books say what they're doing is illegal.
Yes. I have been clear. I have not changed my stance. I understand. But they can't be there. It's not safe for the squeegee workers. It's not safe for the citizens. You know, just last night, I was driving on President Street. First, I was going down President Street, and a squeegee worker came up to my car, said no. He looked at me and said, okay. Then coming back, it was a little darker.
Yep.
Told the squeegee worker no. He decided to squeegee my window. I said, man, what'd I say? He looked in the window. He was a little irritated, and then I realized he recognized who I was and greatly apologized and said, you know, I don't mean any harm. I said, I understand that. But I understand the want, the desire, the need for the quote unquote, the hustle, the legal hustle, the work. What we need to do is we need to take that enthusiasm, we need to take that entrepreneurial spirit, we need to place it in a different manner. And that's why, you know, I think so many of us are looking at the mayor and the mayor's office to do that. Once again, my job is to enforce the law. Stepping off that sidewalk, going in and out of traffic is illegal. And as far as I'm concerned, we cannot do that.
Does that mean you disagree with the mayor's law department's interpretation of the law, that what they're doing is protected free speech because they say that that's panhandling?
I understand, however, on the law, I disagree. You know, one of the things when I look at the law and I read the Supreme Court case and I recognize you have to look at the facts and apply them differently. To me, there's a difference with panhandling, holding a sign very quietly in a area, not going in and out of traffic.
Right.
Going in and out of traffic is an action. Therefore, I believe that action is illegal. I mean, the other thing is we pay taxes in the city. So individuals making that money in, are they paying taxes? And so I don't know what they're doing, but I do know going in and out of traffic is wrong. The other thing I fear greatly, and I think we've seen allegedly there's an individual charged with some retaliatory type of actions. That can only get worse, and I don't want it to. So my job is to protect everybody, and that includes the squeegee worker as well.
So have you had a conversation with the mayor about him telling the police department that it's okay for them to start issuing citations or arresting people if they continuously break the law?
Well, we had that conversation, and now he has a commission of about, I think, almost 100 people, and they're looking at it. And he knows my stance. I have a gentleman representing me on the commission, and I think I'm going to wait to hear what they have to say. At the end of the day, as I've said, I'm not the state's attorney until January 3rd. And January 3rd, I don't believe probably anybody's going to be doing squeegee work in the middle of winter. I think this will be an issue that if we have to face it come springtime, I'll be prepared to face it. I've done the legal research from my standpoint, and I feel good about where we are. I do recognize there's some questions about issuing citations of underneath of 18. You know, I get that, but I still think there are a number of ways we can still enforce the law. Because at the end of the day, we have to hold people accountable. One of the things that I heard from so many people, remember I talked about knocking on 15,000 doors.
Yeah.
People are afraid. They do not want the lawlessness. The squeegee workers, they're doing what they feel that they want to do in terms of going out there. They're trying to earn the money. I understand that. I respect that. But what I also understand is that there are a lot of citizens that are also have the right, and they don't feel comfortable sometimes with individuals in their private space. We have to find a way to take that want, that entrepreneurial spirit, put it in an environment that's going to legally allow them to understand, to build a practice, to do something so they can eventually own their own business. They want to have a seat at the table to live the American dream. And that is part of, I think, one of the things that we should look at to try to, how can we allow this to happen? But also, how can we also make the citizens feel comfortable in Baltimore City when they drive down our streets?
Yeah.
And so for me, once again, my job is to enforce the law, and I feel if the law is on the books, that's my job.
The citations for juveniles, the mayor has said that that's something that cannot be done. But is that really something that can be done?
Well, I think it's something that's, it's not that it can't be done, but is it going to be a little more cumbersome for the officer?
Right.
And there, it would be more cumbersome. Do I think that we can find a way to streamline that process? I do believe we can. But remember, they're juveniles. And they're juveniles and their parents. And so maybe their parents are the ones who may be at work and receive the telephone call that, hey, we have to sit down and figure out what's going on. At the end of the day, I'm not trying to penalize the juvenile. But also, I want to understand in the middle of the school day, why are they out there on that corner and why are they not in school? Those are some of the questions for me that I have as a parent myself.
Yeah.
And so those are types of things. Look, I'm real big on the way I was raised. My father had rules. I didn't want to listen to him. We don't want to do that when we're teenagers. But he still had the rules, and eventually I had to listen to him.
Do you think that getting kids into the Juvenile Justice Center through a citation or something that could then help them get into other diversion programs, is that one way that you think we could solve this problem as a city?
Well, I'd like to see as many diversion programs as possible. One of the things that people have even asked me in reference to the juvenile, the first time they may have a school fight and we're dismissing those cases, but are those individuals, those young people, are they crying out for help? Where's the mentor programs? You know, I've done a lot of work with juveniles over my years, and one of the things I understand and know is mentorship is so important. Giving that positive role model, hearing those young individuals to find out what the problems that they have. So I don't want to necessarily do it in the criminal justice system, but if I have to, then I will. But I'm not trying to give any records to juveniles for those low-level offenses. I'm trying to steer them in the right direction, whether it's the mentorship within the juvenile justice system or whether it's the mentorship from an organization that does so much work within the juveniles within themselves.
But if that doesn't work,
then if it doesn't work, then I'm going to be forced to do my job, and my job is to hold people accountable. I understand that.
you said you've met with the mayor.
Yes.
We know you met with the police commissioner. You've met with the governor.
Yes.
Looking at the relationships in the city, though, we know that the governor will have a new governor
Yes.
come November or January of next year. Do you think that you can be successful in this position with the current mayor and the current police commissioner? Is it possible for you all to get on the same page about how to handle crime and some of the biggest issues?
I do think it's very possible. I think it's something that the citizens need and they demand. I think everybody wants to make sure that we hold violent offenders accountable. There's no doubt about that. So I think it's easy to first find out what do we agree upon and build the relationship from there. I know that the mayor is a public servant who loves the city. And grew up in the city, and the police commissioner loves the city as well. So now those are two things that we all have in common. So the third thing is, how do we deal sometime with the low-level offenses?
Yeah.
I think from there, having that constant communication, having that dialogue. As long as we're talking, I believe we'll be able to find out a way to do that. But also remember, it's those police officers that are going out in the community who will be enforcing. Those are the individuals, those troops that we have to make sure that we give the proper directive to so that they know what to do. So I think until we're able to have that agreement with everybody, we don't want the confusion with the police. It'll be confusion in the community. So we have to have the same page.
Do you think that the way that the current policies were rolled out, the miscommunication and lack of understanding of how to move forward from that, was that damaging to the city?
Without a doubt, it was damaging. When I spoke to the police commissioner, I think that was some of the confusion from the police department. So when you change a policy, the police need time to be trained on that policy. And the community needs time to be educated on the policy. Look, my job before this job was being a criminal defense attorney. I remember having conversations with clients that would come in that would tell me that they didn't understand why, and this happened a number of times, especially in Baltimore County, why were they arrested for marijuana in Baltimore County? Because Ms. Current State's attorney made it legal to sell drugs or to have drugs. I would try to explain how that wasn't correct. And that's where sometimes the confusion of policy can hurt. So we have to be on the same page. We have to educate the community about what the policy. For instance, let's talk about handguns.
Yeah.
I've been crystal clear. If you have an illegal handgun, you need to be prepared that we're asking for you to go to jail. I've met with university presidents, hospital administrators, and I said, look, for instance, if you could be the star of the basketball team in college and you could be a straight A student, but if you have an illegal handgun, I have to treat you the same way. That way you understand the seriousness. It's going to hurt me to do that, but I have to, because that's what I ran on and that's what I told the citizens. But I will give you a path to clean up the record so it's expungible, but I feel we have to hold everybody accountable the same way.
Throughout the campaign, it's been pretty clear.
Yeah.
Criminals, should know that you will hold them accountable. Can you do that, though, if the mayor isn't on the same page?
I have to find a way to do that. I feel that's why the citizens elected me. I mean, look, I don't really view myself as a politician. I view myself as a lawyer who's really sick of what I saw, who decided to walk away from their practice because I believe in the city. And I really don't want my daughter to grow up in a city like this. I have to find a way to do that with the mayor. If we do not come eye to reach, the police commissioner serves at the pleasure of the mayor. So I may just be all alone and said, hey, here I am, I'm ready to proceed. But at the end of the day, the mayor does have a huge voice in this process. I can only put myself in a position to be prepared to do the job. At the end of the day, you're right, it does take a collaborative working relationship. I will do everything I can to have that working relationship with the mayor, to explain to the mayor that that's what the citizens want, and they have to be able to feel safe. But I can't make anyone do what they don't want to do.
Does he want to do that right now? Did he communicate that to you?
Well, what he communicated is that we're going to find a way to make this work, and that we may not always see eye to eye, but we can find things that we agree upon. At the end of the day, his goal is to keep the citizens of Baltimore City safe.
Where are you guys not seeing eye to eye?
I would probably say in some ways maybe the squeegee workers, but I honestly say we paused that so we could listen to what the commission was really going to say.
We're still waiting for that. I mean, right? The Squeegee Collaborative has been meeting for months and months. Yeah. They say we're going to get something in terms of recommendations to the mayor. At this point, it could come between now and the end of fall. So between now and, Thanksgiving or so. Will that be enough time for you to get a plan together if those recommendations come out that late, to put a plan together and figure out how to communicate what will happen come January?
I think, well, first let me hear what they have to say. They may say that they need to leave, and we're going to direct them into this direction.
Do you think that will happen, though? The mayor's been pretty clear that he doesn't want to clear the corners.
Well, I don't necessarily view it as clearing the corners. I view it as enforcing the law. And, they're not supposed to be on the corners in the first place to clear them. And so I think how we interpret that, I'm an optimist. So I do believe that in looking at the law, and I've spoken to a couple of individuals, and they've asked me my viewpoint on the law, and I've tried to direct them where I felt strong about the law and what the law had to say. So I'm going to be positive and say yes.
Okay. We'll see. Let's schedule another interview for when those recommendations come out, and then we'll chat.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll hold you to that.
Yes.
Looking at the relationships, we talked about building the relationships. Do you have any sort of relationship with the current state's attorney?
We've spoken the day of when she called me. I try to be as respectful as possible. She's current state's attorney. I want to allow her the space to do the job that she feels and she was elected to do. But right now, I've been really focused on finishing up my work and my practice. So to answer your question, not really, but I wouldn't expect that because, we are contemporaries in the law before, and she's doing her job.
Looking at where the voters how the voters voiced their opinion, she lost pretty handedly in the primary. Do you think that that's an indication that the city was not on board with her policies, did not agree with how she was handling crime and violent crime in the city, and they're looking to you to really, really make a big change?
Yes, I definitely believe that. I mean, look, if you take all the votes that didn't go to her, that's almost 71% of the city said we want a new direction.
Right.
I think also I was pretty clear on my policies. And I think the majority of the citizens say we like what Mr. Bates is saying and we want to go in that direction. So I understand the want of policies. Look, I understand mass incarceration. I could tell stories for days about mass incarceration, things I went through with police officers as a black man in America, but also things I watched my clients go through. Look, I played a major role in exposing Gun Trace Task Force.
Yeah.
But I also know that we've kind of let the pendulum swing too far. We need to bring it a little more in a moderate location so that we hold people accountable, but also understand that, people make mistakes. Let's figure out what we can do maybe in the expungement area after they've earned that right. One of the things that I've really always enjoyed as a defense attorney, when the judge would say, in the law you have a thing called a motion for modification, where the judge can modify your sentence. But when a judge does that, that you've earned that right. You've shown them that you actually have taken responsibility for your actions. You've shown them that you want to change your actions, and you've shown them that you've really learned from your actions. I believe when we do that, we can then eliminate some of the mass incarceration issues, but give people that opportunity to erase what I call that scarlet letter, so that you no longer have that criminal conviction. That's what I really would like to try to show the focus. You're holding people accountable, but you're giving them that opportunity when they've shown you the initiative to make that change.
I want to talk about the Adnan Syed case.
Okay.
It's in the headlines. It's been in the headlines for a couple of weeks now. Do you agree with what happened and how this case played out?
Well, a couple of things. I was on the record in the past of my feelings. I don't know totally how everything has played out, but I can tell you what I've seen in the press. Based on what I've seen in the press, and I still have to be careful because it could potentially, there are two potential other suspects, so I don't want to talk about the facts per se, but what I can tell you what I've seen in the press, it doesn't appear that the victim and the victim's family were involved in the process, and that is concerning to me. But once again, I do not know. I only know what they've said, and you see the victim's family, well, you see everybody else. But I can also tell you, one thing I can tell you I really don't like, I don't like the finger pointing, and I don't like the accusations. I think that's unfair to everybody involved, and I think what that does, it makes the average person who already has a disbelief and a lack of trust in the criminal justice system question it.
Yeah.
And I think if we didn't do that, I really have admired the way in which, to be honest, Mr. Syed's attorneys and even Mr. Syed, they've handled this entire matter. They've been very focused on the law, as they should be. And so I've admired the way in which they've handled it. Remember, the criminal justice system is not perfect. And it's you're going to be advocates, and it's adversarial, and you fight for what you believe in. And I may have handled things differently.
How?
But just in the sense, I'm really big on communication. I may have said, hey, you know what, there's no need to do it right away. Let's make sure the victim's family knows we need to be here that day. But I wasn't in the room. For all we know, according to the state, they had those conversations. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, to me, I may have handled it a little differently.
From the outside, does it feel to you like this was rushed at the end of her term? This all happened, with her federal trial, and it all happened. The coincidence of the timing has raised a lot of questions.
It does raise a lot of questions. I would hope not. Let me say that. Because if it was, then it makes you question the criminal justice system. Because then it's self-serving. And I don't want to have that question of the criminal justice system. I think there are a lot of questions that'll be answered. I think some of those questions will be answered in the future. But I'm the guy who believes the glass is half full. And so I want to believe that Mrs. Mosby would not do that, and the state's attorney's office would not do that, because that would be beyond unfair, not only to to the victim's family, but that's really unfair to Mr. Syed, because then he would be labeled with that, and he would be caught up in something that he didn't deserve to be a member or part of. So I have to believe no, but I do understand and see the concern, and I've heard that a great deal as well.
The victim's family's attorney has said that they're questioning the validity of the DNA results. Is that something that you're willing to comment on, given the fact that there are two suspects out there and this case could end up coming to you? Do you have any understanding of how that process played out, or do you intend to look into that at all when you take over?
Well, because it could be a potential ongoing case, ethically I can't comment. But what I will say is that, if the case is on my desk, then I will without a doubt look at it. One of the things that I'm really glad that I bring to the table is a great deal of trial experience. I've looked at DNA, I understand, and Just because some DNA is not found on something, that doesn't mean that the case isn't viable, and just because it's found on something doesn't mean the case is viable. I'll look at all the facts, I'll look at all the evidence, and then if I have to, I'll make that decision. But I think it's very important to allow everybody, and if we decide not to charge, I think it's very important to be as transparent as possible and to make that information available, especially to the victim's family, so they have the understanding to sit down, go over everything. I think it's important sometime when you have if you're not going to prosecute, then maybe you have the detective and your experts sit down with the victim's family to explain the process. They may not agree with it, but at least we've had the opportunity to speak with them.
Looking at staffing in the office, that is a big concern. Have you had any conversations or started working to recruit and hire attorneys to come work for you?
I have. A lot of people are excited. They've expressed an interest. But one of the things, I'm always trying to have a better understanding of the budget. I haven't been able to have that full understanding as of yet. I think one of the things we have to be a little creative. One of the questions I did ask the city was, hey, my understanding there's some homicide prosecutors that have almost 30 cases. That's absurd. That means you cannot do the job the proper way.
Right.
There's some homicide prosecutors that do not have vacation. They're in trial almost every week until June. That's absurd. People need vacations. They're not machines. People need the opportunity to really put 100% effort into the case, because that individual who was murdered deserves that. So I need to find a way to think outside the box. I would love to have some retired homicide prosecutors. I'd love to be able to bring them in, maybe 1 or 2 cases, to lighten the load just a little bit. And then that way we can have some of the younger prosecutors sit there and learn from some of the more experienced prosecutors. It won't affect their retirement, but it's something very similar like I do on the CJA. CJA panel on the federal side is the court appoints me to handle the case, and it's the government that will pay me to represent that individual. We would work with an individual who may have been retired, can still do homicides, and we would like to be able to pay them from part of our budget to handle that case. And that way we know that would lighten the load off the prosecutors. That will make sure that we have an experienced prosecutor handling that case, and it'll make sure the victim gets the respect that they're due. That will allow us to immediately deal with and do some of the triage from what I see. That will also allow us to train young prosecutors so they can now learn how to handle murder cases, because eventually they'll be those individuals that'll be in the seats. So I'm trying to think outside the box. I'm trying to understand all the issues in that office. The 2 things that I will be focusing on immediately: 1, rebuilding that office. And 2, violent crime. I will make sure that those are the 2 things I focus on going in.
You mentioned the stats. 70-some% of the people of Baltimore voted against the current state's attorney and the policies. There's rebuilding the office, violent crime, squeegee kids, change in policies. How soon would you tell the city of Baltimore things will be different?
Day 1, you change attitude. That can change. Day 1 I said, the night I get sworn in, I plan to go to a roll call midnight. And I want to look those officers in the eye to say, hey, we're on the same team, and the citizens deserve us to give 100% effort. Not saying you haven't, but just recognize that from my standpoint, I'm going to give 100% effort. I think that's how we begin to change the change of attitude. But also you have to get the message out there to the criminal element. It's kind of interesting. I've heard from a couple of defense attorneys that their clients have asked them to hurry up and bring their cases in before January.
Really?
Because they heard Bates is coming and Bates isn't playing. That is true. I am coming and I'm not playing. But that does not mean you'll see the change right away. It's going to take a while for the change. It's going to take a while. It's difficult to say, to be honest. Because I don't know where the prosecutors will be in terms of, where we are. But what the citizens can know is that we're working hard every single day. And I often look at things, and I love sports, in terms of the rebuild. Let's look at our Orioles. Came in, and the general manager said there was going to be a time he had to get young talent. He had to train the young talent. And now we begin to see the fruits of the labor. I would say, give me the time, and you'll see I'll bring in young talent. One of the things when I met the governor I talked about was, from what I can tell, they haven't spent a lot of money on IT in the state's attorney's office.
Really?
And when I look at that, on the federal side, it's an experience for the juror. They see the body camera footage. It's right there. They understand. They have the closing arguments. They do it in a way where they use the evidence that's been introduced to almost entertain the juror so they understand the story. I want to be able to do that with the prosecutors. I want to be able to have the jurors see what the officers have seen. And that's how we'll be able to secure convictions. It's going to take time to be able to get the money for that equipment. It's going to take time to have that equipment, to be trained on that equipment, and to use that equipment. You'll see a lot of changes internally that we'll make that the citizens won't know about. But then what'll happen day by day, I have to build and rebuild the foundation that's been cracked. So when you talk about time, some 2-3 years, it's been 8 years that we've had a number of these policies. I'm not saying it's going to take 8 years, but it will take time. But you will see a change in the attitude. That's the one thing I can say.
Perfect. I think I'm all set.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. Thank you very much.